is show number 59, and I am honored to have a former student of mine when I taught middle school mathematics back in the Oakland Public Schools in the late 90s. I want to welcome Pete DeFelice to the show tonight. Pete, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, awesome. So Pete is here to tell his story tonight and share some tips that are specifically geared to helping younger professionals who are entering the workforce right after college to make a successful impact and essentially get off on the right foot. So Pete, I'm really looking forward to you sharing your story tonight. So again, thank you. As we welcome everybody here tonight, just a few housekeeping things. If you have any questions for Pete or myself tonight, go ahead and put them in the comment box. We'll pause toward the end to take some questions from everybody. This episode and all of my other Facebook Lives are housed on my Facebook page that you're watching right now, as well as on my website at johnnerrell.com. And if you go to my website, you can find a great resource there called 3 Steps to Creating Your Next Advancement Opportunity Without Feeling Overwhelmed. You simply click on the link, you'll get a download for the workbook, and it also puts you into my email community where I help professionals who are ambitious about their careers essentially figure out what's next and help them do what I like to call create their next advancement opportunity. So with that all being said, Pete, as we get started, simply tell all of our listeners tonight who you are and what do you do.
Well, again, I appreciate you having me. So, like Mr. Nerrell said, I actually, I know he tells me to call him John. I just can't do it. It's been Mr. Nerrell for way too long.
I get it.
He said he was my teacher back in 1998. So it's been quite a bit of years that we've known each other. Right now, I live in East Hampton, New Jersey, which is in Burlington County. I have a wife, Brooke, and I have actually 4 children. I have 2 stepchildren, Destiny, who's 19, Wade, who's going to be 14 this Saturday, and then I have 2 little guys. I have Luca, who's 4, and my daughter Meadow, who is 3. So very busy, and I try to keep active. Right now, I'm a quality assurance manager for a mortgage servicing company. What I do is I oversee all the call center activity, so anything that's borrower facing. We make sure that the calls are going in accordance with legal requirements, internal controls, and then also making sure that, client deliverables are being met as well. So there's a lot that goes on with that. So it keeps me busy. I'm also going for my master's degree right now. I'm trying to go for my MBA with Montclair State. That's where I went for my undergrad. Graduated back in 2006. So I took a little time off of school, but I'm back in the game again.
So how is it for you as really now a mid-career professional going back to school and juggling work responsibilities and family responsibilities and still carrying a full load in order to get your MBA?
It's a lot, and it actually kind of makes me, in a way, I kind of regret that I didn't just do it right after college. But then I also look at a lot of the coursework that I'm taking right now. I don't think it would have made sense to me then at 21 versus me now at 34. So a lot of what we're learning about is not just, the basic stuff, but it's also how to be a manager and things that go with that, and different strategies within a global perspective within an organization. So it's great exposure, but it takes a lot of juggling to make sure you give everyone the time. You got to obviously serve the employer, you got to serve your family, and then when there's time, you get some schoolwork done. So it's going great.
No, good. I'm glad to hear all of that. So Pete, as we get started tonight, when we were prepping for tonight's show and talking about what your message is and what you wanted to share, one of the things that came up was just kind of understanding a little more about what quote unquote life is like after college, and that whole concept about the expectations we have versus reality when we get into the workforce. So could you tell us a little bit about that and what that means for you?
Sure. Well, I think it's different for everyone, but I'll definitely talk about kind of how it was for myself. So when I graduated back in 2006, I actually got my bachelor's in 3 years. I did a lot of additional coursework. I tried to kind of load up over the summers just to try to get my degree as soon as possible. I was ambitious. I wanted to make a lot of money. That was obviously the main driver, for myself at that time. But what you find is that, our class was kind of unique in the sense that when we graduated, it was at 06, 07, we were right on the cusp of kind of one of the greatest financial collapses that we've had in our country back in 08 and 09. So when I got my first job right out of college, I worked for Bear Stearns. They were at the time the 7th largest company globally. and I worked in their compliance department. So I was great. I was making $23 an hour. I thought, sky's the limit. This is going to be the place I am for the rest of my life. Then 08, 09 happened. Unfortunately, that just wasn't the case, and they went through bankruptcy. Chase ended up buying them out at pennies on the dollar when they were, I think, trading about $120 a share when I joined the company. Yeah. So big collapse there. But I think what you kind of realize, it's humbling when stuff like that happens, because you realize that's life. Just because you have a degree doesn't mean that things are just going to come to you. You still have to put in the work, to navigate through that time. And obviously now I think we're rebounding nicely. I think we're in a little bit better position now than we were then. Obviously we still have some room for growth, but it's a lot, and it's humbling at that age, and you really have to mature quickly to say you can't just sulk about it. You have to get back on the horse and really go back out there and keep trying to market yourself with different employers. So
I love how you said that too, because there's such power in the pivot, and the pivot sometimes is not within our control. We have to kind of react to it because the company goes through some changes, and certainly for those of us who remember, that was a pretty devastating time when we saw these big companies that we thought were indestructible crumble, like you said, at pennies on the dollar. And then there's that whole story there about, well, where do those people get to go to work, right? And so for younger professionals, it's such a great point, Pete, is that pivot has to happen, but it also doesn't mean it's not easy. Would you agree?
Exactly. I totally agree.
Yeah.
And, to your point, I mean, sometimes things are going to throw you throughout life. And I think one of the key messages, at least what I'm trying to obviously impart that wisdom on my stepchildren. Obviously they're older, Destiny being 19 and in college, is that you just have to keep working. If you go out every day, and my father had a very simple philosophy. If you work hard, you do the right things each day, good things will come. So sometimes it doesn't come right away. And sometimes things get frustrating because you feel like it's not happening as quick as you'd like them to. But if you just keep working at it and realize that you have to keep just, reinventing yourself and keep yourself fresh out there, it will come.
Yeah. Do you, you're familiar with Susie Orman?
Yes.
Right. So years ago, she wrote a book called something like The Guide to the Young, Fabulous, and Broke. She called them YFBers. And it was right during that time that you're talking about. And one of the pieces of the book that I love so much was that she said, the best investment a young professional can make is investing in their career. Meaning, if you need to be at work at 9 o'clock in the morning, you show up at 8. If you're supposed to leave at 5 or 5:30, you leave at 6:30. Like, you do what you can in order to move yourself forward, because that's going to be the biggest payoff for you in terms of your work ethic, your reputation, and how you get to advance yourself. That always stuck with me.
Definitely. Definitely. And in a lot of jobs I've had, I've tried to do that as well. Make sure that you just do the simple things right, and then the rest usually will follow along. So
yeah, no, absolutely. So, and of course, this is just so much fun for me because I remember you when I had you in class, right? And one of the things I always remembered is that you were very focused. You were very focused and driven, and getting your work done and all that was important to you. So with that being said, motivation is certainly a driver. It's an influencer, right?
Yep.
So I want you to talk a little bit right now about how you've seen over your career how motivation sometimes shifts and how that drives us differently.
Definitely. Well, first thing I would like to say too, that, growing up, and not even just, in school, I think in sports, I tried to do the best I could. I wasn't always the best at everything, but I tried to always do the best I possibly could in every scenario. And even with certain classes in school, right? Like math seemed to come a little bit easier to me. I just seemed to gravitate toward it. History was always a good one for me. Science, not so much. But if you attack everything with the same type of motivation, I think that helps as well. Also, too, as you get older, your motivations change, right? So like I said before, the big motivator that I had when I worked at Bayer was just making a lot of money. I just was a young guy. I was single. I was living on my own. I lived in Parsippany, was the first apartment I bought. I was just living by myself and doing my own thing. Now that you have a family, things that jobs offer you as far as what they can provide, that also, is a big motivator, because, having children, right? So making sure that you have good medical benefits and making sure that there's a good retirement plan. Obviously, I'm 34, but it's not really that young when you want to start, putting stuff away and start planning for that next step. So your motivations definitely change as you get older, and also to your wants. I mean, jobs that I had 12 years ago are a lot different than I have now. I'm looking at things from a different lens. The job I have now gives me a lot more exposure than I've had to senior management, being in higher level meetings and looking at things from a different scope, which has helped as well.
And I love how you said that as well too, because when we talk about these motivators, they're often directly connected to our values. And our values change as life changes, right? And I can remember having conversations with people who would say, well, money isn't everything. Well, money has to be something, right? Money has to have a place because we've got bills to pay and we have to honor our responsibilities and things. And money lets us take vacations or make donations or give to charity, put food on the table, whatever it is. Money is an understandable motivator, especially at different points in our lives when we need to make a little bit more money, right? And then family comes along, and then family becomes a big value driver in terms of our motivation and what that all looks like and such. And I know that in my work with my one-on-one clients, we spend a lot of time talking about core values and what they mean and how you honor them day in and day out. And I think this is really powerful to hear from someone like you that, we all have our values that we need to honor because it's what drives us.
Absolutely. And it's funny too. I mean, just real quick, I wanted to kind of say about, when I was younger and I was in high school, my father and I have always had a close bond. I mean, since I've been born, him and I I was attached to his hip from the time I was a little guy. I was probably about 2-3 when I went to my first Yankee game. Him and I have done so many things together, but you hit that point when you're in high school and as a late teen, you think you know more than he does. And you start thinking, oh, he doesn't know everything. I know everything. It's just, you have that kind of mentality when you're a teenager. But I'll tell you something, as being a father now myself and having a home to take care of, a lot of the things that I used to be critical of my father on years ago about, he'd always be working on holidays, he'd never be around. I realize now that wasn't him wanting to do that. That was a sacrifice he was making for his family. And, I've kind of learned that. And I always tell him now, I'm like, you were so right back then of the things you were doing and even some of the things he was trying to guide me with. Sometimes it takes us a little bit longer to get the aha moment, but certainly gotten there.
No, absolutely. That's well said. So Pete, what does it mean for you to never give up in your career?
It's just persevering. It's making sure that, whatever you feel your worth is, you should always make sure that you're getting that. So if you are unemployed, then you work as hard as you can to get yourself employed. And it's not going to come to you. Nobody's going to do it for you. You have to get out there. And I will tell you that times in my career where I've had those gaps of employment, like with Bayer going bankrupt and I had to kind of reinvent myself back then, it's kind of just writing down some ideas. What are the key goals that you want to do within your career? And then making sure that when you're looking for new jobs, that those match what your goals are. Because you can work anywhere, but if it's not going to advance your career, you're going to feel like you're just working, you're not advancing during that time.
Sure.
When you're in a job and you feel like maybe you're stuck or maybe you feel like there is room for advancement elsewhere, go get it, because the only person who's going to advocate for you is you. So I think that's my definition anyway of motivation.
Yeah. So following up on that, you and I've talked a little bit about this before, and for those of you who've been watching and following along, you know that I define how we show up as 6 particular strategies, and they are setting ground rules, having intentional conversations, owning where you're at, welcoming new opportunities, using your genius, and protecting and promoting your brand. So my question to you is that when you talk about this resiliency and you talk about never giving up and paying your dues, how has all of that protected and promoted your brand as you've shown up energetically and professionally in the workplace?
Well, I think, it's funny now at my age, I'm a little bit more daring, if I could say, in different employers that I've worked with than maybe I was 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, I kind of just did what I was told and I tried to do it well. Now what I try to do is say, here's how to do it, but here's how to do it better. And employers want to hear that. They don't want to just have robots working under them. They want people that are going to challenge the way that things are, and in a positive way that can build the organization. I can remember when I first started at my current employer, we had a person who actually came on board maybe around mid 2016, and he needed me to build out a team. We had just recently kind of restructured, and he needed help building and developing what is currently my team now. And I did that. I went through all the metrics. I did all the nuts and bolts of the job. And then I remember sitting in his office maybe about a month later, he had everything built out. And he said, well, we need a manager now to run it. And part of me kind of like this little question came over my brain. I just said, ask the question, because if you don't ask, you're not going to get. And I said to him, why isn't that me? The team trusts me now. I've helped build this thing out. Why isn't that me? And he goes, you're right. You are the right person for it. So just having that conversation with him got me the job that I'm at now. Been there for 3 years, a little over 3 years now. It's a good organization. I've had fun being there and learning and developing. So you got to take the risks sometimes. If you don't ask, your employers don't know how you feel and where you want to go. Most employers just think you want to punch in and punch out. So always constantly make sure that you're reinforcing what your goals are with your current employer.
Thank you for sharing that. And so, as I'm listening to you, there are 3 C's that are coming up for me, and it's competence, confidence, and cockiness. So when you talk about knowing your worth and being able to have that conversation with a supervisor or a leader in your office as you go to advocate for yourself, where do you think those 3 things fall into play? Again, it's competence, confidence, and cockiness.
Yeah, so I think competency comes with learning the job, right? So as you further develop, those things will come. So I didn't have a whole lot of quality assurance background when I first started at Cenlar. I had a little bit of it, but not a ton of it. So I've learned. Now I could speak in meetings with higher level people. I could meet with regulators, and I can talk intelligently on what I'm doing. That just came with learning the job, listening, not talking, letting them teach you. Sometimes that's hard too. Is taking step back and absorbing as much as you can. Confidence, I think, is just how you approach every day. You have to approach every day with a mindset. Cockiness, it's kind of funny. It's a fine line, because you don't want to be too cocky, because that can be off-putting. But I do think that there has to be a little bit of swagger, and you have to sell yourself. I think, to your point, if you don't sell your brand and let people know, hey, I'm important, there's a reason I'm here, then nobody's going to know that. So the more you get yourself integrated within an organization, that'll come as well.
I like how you said that, and I can remember in past jobs where I've worked with younger professionals, one of the defaults for some of them have been this belief or expectation that their manager will always advocate for them because they know, or they should know, all their work and what they're doing. And so when that opportunity comes up, and they find out that it went to somebody else, that whole thought about going to have a conversation and advocating for themselves never entered into the equation, because they just thought, well, it'll just happen. It'll get taken care of because my boss is supposed to know. And then they get really disappointed in that regard. And that is just, it's an unfortunate missed opportunity, but it's a great learning lesson in the process.
Definitely. And that's going to happen in careers too. Sometimes that ship's going to sail, and you just have to, again, you got to stay focused and not give up, because it's easy to just kind of throw your hands up and say, this one thing didn't go my way, and that's it. But let's face it, in the corporate world especially, there's so many opportunities. That door that closes today will be open again next week. Yep. So just got to keep your motivation there. Got it.
Absolutely. So let's just pause for a quick second. We've got a handful of people that are in the room. I want to thank everybody for hanging out with us tonight. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to go ahead and type them in. They'll pop up for us, and we'll send them over to Pete and see how he answers them. So Jennifer and Ken and Sean and Matt Whiteley's in the room. So big shout out to Matt and Bill. Yeah, absolutely. Matt, good to see you, buddy. Good to see everybody in here. Yeah. So if you have a question, go ahead and type that in. We'll push it over to Pete here. So Pete, as we start kind of wrapping up a little bit, if there's a, let's say there's a younger professional that's just kind of starting out, they're listening to this show, they're kind of consuming this content, if there's one thing that you could share with them that you believe would be most helpful or transformative for them in their career, what would you say to them?
I would say run fast but walk slow. You can't, you're not going to be a vice president overnight. So if that's kind of the direction, obviously I'm speaking more in a corporate sense, but whatever that high achievement is, it's not going to happen right out of college. Unfortunately, even though you have that degree, it's sometimes a misconception that I walk out of college, I'm going to get handed a really, really high level position because I have this piece of paper. But the fact is that an employer is paying you for an investment. So if you're going to make a lot of money, they need to make sure that they're going to get a return on that investment, right? It's just common sense. So the thought process really needs to be every year, just try to build upon your skill sets. And if you do that and you put in the hard work and you show good leadership, and leadership doesn't have to be the position, right? Everyone thinks, well, leaders are managers and supervisors. Right. A leader is somebody who's willing to pick someone up, because at the end of the day, a company as a whole is what's successful. So if there are people in the organization that need assistance, your help is what's going to define you as a leader. But I would definitely say that just make sure that you stay motivated, but at the same time, go slow and make sure that you're building the right way. I'd rather see somebody be a high level person in 10 years that has a bulk of knowledge that's going to make them successful than get a high level position very quickly and fail because they weren't adequately prepared for that position.
Yeah, thank you for that. There's so much research that's out there about high potentials and high performers, especially younger professionals that get immediately tagged with that kind of moniker and they get thrown into a position. And the thought from leadership in some ways is that, well, they're smart, they'll just figure it all out. And what they miss sometimes is that they don't have the necessary training or even just the necessary connections to check in with them to see what's working well and what obstacles are coming up for them, that all of a sudden they get disenfranchised and now they're leaving the organization and they're step back going, well, what happened? I gave them this great opportunity and they missed a chance to connect with them at a much more meaningful level in that.
Definitely.
All right, we got a couple questions. You ready?
Okay, right, I'm ready.
Let's see if I can make the technology work and pop this up here. All right, let's see if we can do this. All right, here we go. So Sean's asking, have you ever felt the tension between staying in the corporate structure versus entrepreneurship, starting your own business? How do you resolve it?
That's a really good question. So there's been a couple of times that I've actually tried to start my own business, and it's hard, I think. So kind of what I said before is like, you know, how your motivations are different as kind of life evolves, right? So when you're a single guy, you feel like you can take a lot more risk because you're accountable for yourself. So if it fails, it's you that's going to take the brunt of that. I think it's harder, and it's not saying that you can't do it with a family, but I think sometimes, at least just from my perspective, with a family, you want a little bit more security in the sense of you want to make sure that, yes, that business could be successful. You mentioned Matt's join, and I actually have been to his comic book shop up in North Jersey. I think he's doing a great job, and it's funny to see how he's, you know, kind of grown in his life. But you know, it's something where if you could take that risk, but it is a risk, and I think just for some people, it's just a different way of presenting. There's no right or wrong way, but if you want to take the risk, just make sure that you have all your ducks in a row and that you're ready to go and that you're willing to fail, because just like in a corporate structure, it's not always a success. Sometimes we have bad days. Sometimes things fail. You got to just pick yourself back up again.
Right. And Sean, to your point too, what I'd add on to that is there's so much out there that is all of these quick fixes and quick successes, you know, make $1 million in the next 30 days or get 10,000 Instagram followers in a year or 30 days or whatever. And it sounds all well and good. And I'm not saying that can't be done, but there's a lot of things that have to fall into place to make that happen. And to Pete's point, it's understanding the pay value and the cost value of the risk in order to move forward in that way. And gotta kind of weigh all those out and figure out what's there. But I loved your word tension. I thought that was a great word to kind of describe that, because it's definitely that pull and tug. Yeah. All right, we got another question.
Okay.
Jennifer's asking, how do you manage the fear of pivoting?
Well, I think like what kind of happened to me early on is that the pivot happened. It wasn't me, anticipating it. It just kind of came to me. And I think that's what kind of defines us sometimes, because life just happens. I mean, yeah, I always joke with my friends. I said, back when I was 20 years old, I had 2 comments I said I would never do in my life. I would never get married. I'd never have kids. And I didn't take my own advice. No, I'm kidding. But I love the fact that I have that family now. So, life just comes at you sometimes, and you can't have fear, because if you have fear, you're going to fail. You have to just let life hit. And then, okay, it's a shock. You have to absorb it. Maybe you lose your job. Obviously, that's a horrible thing. But remember, there's other jobs out there. There was probably a job before that job. There's going to be jobs after it. Just get back on the horse and just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. There is such power in the pivot. However it is on the other side of it, there's a great opportunity to learn in that pivot. And yeah, it's fearful and everything, but kind of what do you get to learn in that moment because of the pivot?
Yep.
All right. So Pete, we're actually at time. At time. So I know it went quick, didn't it?
It did.
So I want to thank you. If anybody wanted to reach out to you, what would be the best way for them to connect with you?
So my email, actually, I'm a former lacrosse coach, so you can email me at DeFelice Lax. It's my last name, DeFelice@gmail.com.
Okay.
You could reach me on my cell. I'll put my cell out there. That's okay. It's 732-703-1703. Look forward to it. If it's someone I know from the past, love to hear from you. Okay. If it's somebody new and I can help you, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. All right, Pete, it's been a pleasure. I know we got a chance to reconnect a little bit beforehand, so stay with me just for a few more moments. Everybody, thanks so much for watching today. Really appreciate it. Stay tuned. I've got another show coming up for you in a couple of weeks. And in the meantime, just have a great rest of the night. Make it a great Friday, and we will talk soon enough. Thanks again for joining tonight. Bye-bye. Thanks again, Pete.
Thank you.